Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. In this video, I'm going to briefly discuss something I kind of refer to as the domicile paradox, if you will, and how it affects U.S. immigration. There are various kinds of cases, mostly involving American expats who are looking to return to the United States, where the issue of the American citizen's domicile, or more specifically residence, comes into play. It's been sort of I won't necessarily call it a pet peeve exactly, because that's not quite the right word, but the way that the Department of State views domicile is slightly different than sort of the way in which that a traditional lawyer is gonna view the issue. Basically, domicile, its basic definition, means a place you've left but intend to return to. So, for example, if one has a house, whether they own it, rent it, technically speaking, it could be somebody else's home, perhaps a parent or something, but you leave that house, an individual goes ahead and leaves home, and they're gone for a year, but they come back. And the entire time they intended to return. That's sort of a classic example of what we define as domicile in sort of a general legal context, okay? That being said, the Department of State takes something of a slightly different view. And when I first started dealing with this, as I said, it was kind of a pet peeve, and I started to understand why it was there. It was basically what Department of State wants to go ahead and do is ascertain and determine and understand and have some certainty about the fact that an individual American citizen is going to return to the U.S. to live, because the underlying visa, be it for a spouse, and this is all in the context of spouse or fiancé, the underlying reason for issuance is so that the married couple, and presuming with a fiancé that they're going to eventually be married, is so that the couple is going to remain in the United States for at least a fairly prolonged period of time. Now, intentions can change. I'm not saying you have to live in the United States forever, and I don't think Department of State is either. However, they want to make sure that within sort of the instant case, the relatively foreseeable future with respect to the case, that the American citizen is truly returning home. Now, this can lead to some rather interesting situations, especially when dealing with so-called local filings, or what are also called direct consular filings, DCFs. Basically, one can, in theory, file an underlying immigration petition abroad, and in certain circumstances, especially those involving a local USCIS office abroad, one's residence has to be determined at the to be within the jurisdiction, the consular jurisdiction of the embassy, which is hosting the Department of Homeland Security office abroad. And the American citizen has to essentially prove that they're living abroad in the country that's being serviced by these immigration officers who would be taking the case. This creates the so-called domicile paradox, because on one side of the case, you've got to sort of prove up that you're indeed living abroad, and on the other side of the case, the immigration officers want to see so-called affirmative steps showing reestablishment of domicile in the United States. And this can be shown in a number of ways. The easiest one is by the American citizen pre-departing or going ahead of their Thai counterpart. So, for example, an American citizen who files a case over here in Thailand and then travels to the United States later may possibly deal with that. These aren't exhaustive and they're not certain. Other things such as proving up a job, proving up rental of a new place, purchase of a new place, continuous ownership of a place that the couple is returning to. All of this goes pretty far in proving up domicile and intent to reestablish domicile. So, not to belabor the point or confuse the viewer, basically the paradox we're talking about involves an American citizen petitioner for, let's say, an alien spouse or fiance. That American citizen lives abroad. The issue for Department of State is whether or not that American citizen is genuinely returning to the United States to live. And to go ahead and do that, one needs to basically show affirmative steps of what they call reestablishing domicile in the U.S. And some of the steps that can be taken are things like actually returning, renting a place, getting a job, etc. These will go ahead and be pretty demonstrative of one's intentions to return to the USA and remain there. In these cases, it should be noted that there is no one sort of magic bullet, magical key piece of evidence. Department of State officers tend to go ahead and take a sort of a global view of the entire case, a sort of broad view of the case as a whole, when making their determinations with respect to reestablishment of domicile in the USA.